This. We don't need any more time. We're done.
Okay. Let me go ahead and pose the next question to you. I'd like to give you guys an open-ended one, too, for fairness sake. Let me just read the question to you verbatim, and then please talk on this topic. The question says, in evolution, there appears to be no real purpose to life. What hope do you have to offer me to even bother to continue to live? So I guess...
No, what did he say?
For the sake of open-endedness, please, I guess we're talking about morality, purpose, anything along those lines.
Well, let me point out one thing, that this is sort of confusing terms. There may not be a purpose ostensibly defined for the universe as a whole or for society as a whole even. But that doesn't mean that an individual could not set up a purpose for him or herself. I'm going to live first, then I decide what's worthwhile for me to strive for in my life. If I simply subject myself to the mass and say because they don't have a purpose, I'm going to kill myself, there's something demented. I think I need counseling at that point for all practical purposes here. So here again, I think purpose is something that we create individually for ourselves. It's not something that we deduce from the nature of the universe in any way. I'm sure that everyone here has some kind of a purpose in their existence, defined by themselves, defined where they're going to go. So that would be my take on that. And did you want to?
Sure. Look at DNA changes, and it changes so that animals and plants survive. If the DNA changes in a brain of an animal, to make that animal breed successfully by taking care of its young, taking care of its brothers and sisters, and taking care of its family, that animal may survive. If, on the other hand, the DNA goes in a different direction, then the animal learns to swim or fly, that animal can survive. Certain animals have more emotions than others. We can measure the emotions in dogs. Anybody here own a dog that doesn't have any emotions? My two dogs have all kinds of emotions. I can tell when they're guilty, and I can tell, when they're happy, and I can tell when they're sad. And it's good for them. They have the DNA in their brains that gave them the ability to be pack animals. And they survive because of it. Now, some animals, like cats, and how many cat owners in there know that cats aren't pack animals? They don't care if you're home or not. Dog owners know the dogs can't wait for you to get home. The cats survive because of the way they evolved. Human beings survive because of the way we evolved too. So it's important to us to take care of our children. It's important for us to make sure that our families survive. It's important for us to get mad once in a while. It's important for us to love. Those things have to be able to come out of us because we've got the right chemicals in our body to do that. If we didn't have those chemicals, we couldn't do it. So anytime you talk about any kind of emotions, we've got them, and so do lots of other animals. If we want to talk, we can even talk about plants, for heaven's sakes. If insects attack a maple tree, that maple tree gives off a chemical called a pheromone that goes out through the rest of the forest and unites with the leaves and the trees and the rest of the forest. Those trees pick up that pheromone, and then they produce a chemical to withstand the insect infection. That's important for those trees to be able to do that. It's important for them to be able to communicate with each other by using chemicals. It's important for us to do the same thing. What we smell on each other is important. What we see on each other is important. Those things are controlled by DNA. Can you teach your child to love? Can you teach your child to hate? Sure you can. But you can do it because those chemicals are there. We are an animal that has the ability to make our environment part of what so we can survive. We can control our environment. We can control it because we've got intelligence. We can control it because we have emotions. We get those things. We get the basic cards we play with from DNA. Some of us get a better deck than the rest. What are you going to do about that? And the answer is, you can't do anything about it. You can try to fit into your environment. You can't make yourself something that you want to be just by wishing it. You were a sperm and an egg, you know, and that sperm and an egg developed from a lot of cells. Let me. I want to ask you a question because another question because I hear this a lot. People are saying, well, how do you know about that evolution? You weren't there. How do you know that those things are really happening? You weren't there. Well, my question to you is, were you there when you were conceived? Do you remember then? Can you prove that you were conceived if you weren't there? Well, some of you are saying, well, that's a silly question. Well, of course it's a silly question. And it's a silly question because we can look back in the past. We can trace back what happens to animals to make them behave a certain way. We can trace back to certain animals to show what kind of characteristics they have. If you were to take a little chunk of skin right there from me and look at that hair follicle, then you were to take a bird and take his wing and take that little follicle out right there, that's a feather follicle. Of course, if you took it from his leg, it would be a scale follicle. If you took a little chunk from a fish, you'd get another scale follicle. So there's scale follicles, feather follicles, and hair follicles. When we look at the DNA in those follicles, they're almost exactly alike. And then when we look at the DNA that produces the proteins that makes hair, scales, and feathers, it's almost exactly like. We can show relationships. That's important. Evolution wouldn't mean anything if we couldn't show relationships. If we found that a dog was more genetically related to a frog than it is to a cat, we'd know something's wrong. But we never find that. We know we've got so much information genetically that we may never figure it all out. We spent a lot of time here talking about fossils. Fossils don't mean anything as far as evolution is concerned. We don't need them. We got all the evidence we need to prove evolution without fossils. Forget fossils. They just aren't important. What's important is DNA.
All right. The question was, what's the purpose of life? Okay. Joseph Stalin executed 14,700 Polish officers, prisoners of war, at the Katyn Forest. Why did he do that? How would he execute prisoners of war? Adolf Hitler executed at least 6 million Jews, plus millions of others. Why would a person kill Jews? Well, Hitler thought they were an inferior species that hadn't evolved as far. He was actually trying to speed up the evolution process. 1975 to 79, the Khmer Rouge, under the leadership of Pol Pot, executed more than 1/3 of their entire population. Check out the killing fields. Why did they do that? Why were the Australian Aborigines treated like they were animals? Why were Australian Aboriginal skulls dug up out of graves, or people were executed and their skulls were boiled down and they're sold to museums in America to have displays for evolution because they have a bigger jaw than other humans do? Kip Kinkle said, if there was a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. There is no God, only hate. Well, on May 21st, 1998, 15-year-old Kip Kinkle, a student at Thurston High School in Oregon, entered the cafeteria, fired more than 50 rounds from a semi-automatic rifle. 26 students were injured, 2 were killed. Later, the bodies of his parents were found in his home. He was arrested, taken to a police headquarters where he attempted to murder a detective. He said, if there was a God, he wouldn't let me feel the way I do. There's no God, only hate. Why have violent crimes increased nearly 1,000% since I was a boy? And that's the time evolution became a popular theory in our textbook. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris made a video prior to the Columbine shootings. They're talking about a football player. They said he doesn't deserve the jaw evolution gave him. Look for his jaw. It won't be on his body. Klebold's father was a geologist who believed in evolution. Both Eric and Dylan were followers of Nazi teachings. The shooting took place on Hitler's birthday on purpose. It was planned to commemorate Hitler. Eric's T-shirt said natural selection. They killed Cassie and Rachel just because they were Christians. They killed Isaiah just because he was black. Hitler hated black people. After all, they hadn't evolved as far. That was Hitler's thinking. The clothes may give a clue to the thinking of these teenagers. It said natural selection. Yes. What about this natural selection? Well, natural selection selects. It doesn't create a thing. It selects. That's all it can do. It's not a creation process. We go into that some other time. So my answer to the question is there a purpose to life? Absolutely, there certainly is. God created this universe with a plan. He created man with a purpose. Now, I have found in my speaking on this topic about 800 times a year all over the world and 15 years worth now, the reason people accept the evolution theory is not because they have a scientific reason. I asked a kid 2 weeks ago, I was debating two professors, or I forget where I was, it doesn't matter, 3 weeks ago. One kid came afterwards and said, evolution's a fact. I said, well, son, calm down, let me ask you a question. If evolution, if creation was true, if the creation story is true, would that affect your lifestyle any? If there was a creator that said, thou shalt not commit adultery, no pornography, no lying, no cheating, no stealing, would that affect your lifestyle any? He said, you're trying to embarrass me, aren't you? I said, I don't even know who you are. I'm just asking you a question. The reason people accept evolution is because of their sin, not their science.